Okay, we are live. So, welcome everyone. My name is Jared. I'm one of the team members at Podcast Movement, and today we're very excited to have an amazing group of humans from Squadcast. We have Arielle, we have Zachariah, and Rockwell. I'm going to let them kind of introduce themselves very quickly, but just thank you for being a part of this. Today's session, of course, is how to sound your best while recording remotely. So thank you for participating. Thank you for being here. And go ahead and take it away.
Yes, happy to be here. Thank you so much to Jared and the team at Podcast Movement for having us. We are big fans of Podcast Movement and just happy to be professors for the afternoon. So Zach, do you want to introduce Rock and Rock introduce Zach, and then I'll just introduce myself?
Sounds good. Rock is my longtime friend and so grateful that we're also co-founders of Squadcast. Rock introduced me to podcasts as a listener a long time ago, and really, I think was the start of this journey that, now years and years later, we've been working on Squadcast for the past 5 years, and he is a tremendous contributor to our podcast, Between Two Mics, to our company, Squadcast, and he's also a very talented Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner.
Well, thank you. Definitely not talented if anyone sees me. But yeah, so Zach is our CEO and my co-founder. He's also really the one that came up with the idea for Squadcast and approached me about it. And because it was helping podcast creators connect and create high quality content remotely, it was like really easy for me to get excited about. So really grateful that he asked me to go on this journey with him. And now we're at it with folks like Arielle. It's been a great experience, but in some ways we still still getting started. In addition to being an avid podcaster fan, Zach is also really into space. He's an artist, so he's incredibly talented with design and artwork and all sorts of stuff that unfortunately I can never do. But that's what I think that's why we work out so well, is he's just this incredibly gifted artist and software developer, and I help him make sure that we can economically do all these things. Arielle, take it away.
Yes, my name's Arielle, and I am the community manager at Squadcast. Happy to be here among two of my podcasting heroes. And with that, we'll get started with our presentation for today. Would you like it if I control the settings, folks?
That sounds
Professors?
Good. Yeah, we have some slides.
Is that what we're going with? We're calling each other professors for the next hour?
Yeah, you got tenure. I'm still working on mine.
I do. I got tenure pretty early on.
My alma
All
mater.
right. Here we go. So, folks, the topic of today's presentation, we're talking about remote recording, obviously, because we are Squadcast. We'll tell you more about what that means. But we're talking about more specifically within remote recording, how you can sound your best. So here we go. Now is the point where I try to press the right buttons. So we've got slide. Present. Where's the present button? I knew this would happen.
It's on the right next to the yellow share button.
Genius.
There we go.
All right, here we go. Remote recording, setting yourself up for success. Who are we? We kind of just told you that. So we'll move on. But what do we do? Zach, what do we do?
Well, our mission at Squadcast is to amplify collaboration, and we really bring that to life through providing a platform that helps professional podcasters connect with their guests really anywhere in the world and record studio quality content together. There's a whole bunch of stuff baked into that to make sure you always sound great, look great, and have a reliable experience. I think that's really what it boils down to. All of the technical stuff is really for us to handle, and that way our customers, podcasters, and their guests can really focus on what matters most, having an engaging, flowing dialogue conversation that is going to add value to the audience.
That's right. Rock, anything you want to add?
No, just we're very passionate about podcasters. The whole idea for Squadcast came from, like I said, Zach. He wanted to create a science fiction podcast with his friends that were all distributed across California, and just ran into a lot of challenges when it came to reliably recording that content in the highest sound quality possible. So that's what our mission at Squadcast is, to amplify collaboration and really be that like the industry standard when it comes to recording a show remotely.
Now, our mantra for the afternoon, students, and say it with me now. To record quality interviews, you need both stellar tools and remarkable content. Zach, repeat it back.
To record quality, emphasis there, interviews, you need both stellar tools and remarkable content.
Rock, hit us with it one more time. Bring it home.
To record quality interviews, you need both stellar tools and remarkable content. The myth is, though, is that it's difficult, and we're here to bust that myth. It does not have to be difficult to record remotely. So excuse my improv there.
So under the tutelage of Zach and Rock, students, let's dive in. All right, here's what we're going to be talking about for the next, let's say 40 minutes. We'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. We are going to talk about equipment, ever important. What are we recording with? What are we speaking into? We're going to talk about creating remarkable content. So yes, to a certain extent, it's your job, podcasters, to create that content, but we are here to help you along the way. I have a background in storytelling and in audio production, so I can help a little bit there. Then we're going to talk about recording video, which we now have as a feature within Squadcast. Actually, it's built in. It's not a feature, is it? I don't quite know how development terms work.
I think it's a core part of the platform at this point. You know, we support audio and video as first-class forms of content.
Okay, yeah, first class. It's not a feature. It's built right on in. And now that we have that, we want to talk to you about what it means to record video. And we can also tell you about some upcoming events that we have where we're teaching you how to make great video content from Squadcast video. Then we're going to talk about collaborating remotely, which is something that we have all become very familiar with during this pandemic year, and maybe the future of that. And then we're going to open it up to some questions.
Let's go.
What tools are the best?
That's a hard question, you know, but also we see this question often, or variations of it, right? Probably in this very Facebook group. If you scroll down a little bit, there's probably this exact question: what microphone should I use? Should I wear headphones? Does it matter? There's a bunch of answers out there. There's a bunch of anecdotal answers, I'll say. We like to look at our data. What are our customers, what are podcasters and their guests recording with? And really kind of root it in that reality, rather than a kind of our own opinion or relationship with company X or something like that. But before you kind of answer the question about microphone or camera, the technique of using that hardware, that equipment, that device is, I would say, more important sometimes. Like in some situations, like the technique of your mic placement, the distance, how you project your voice into it, how you avoid kind of environmental considerations, and you know that's really where you want to start when it comes to the microphone. If you're interested in a specific device recommendation, we have our RPS, our remote podcast stats report. That will give you a full picture of like what podcasters are actually recording with and how much and all of those things. And I'll touch on this next one and let you two take the next couple. But the other one that I want to mention is headphones. Like, it's not obvious. Like if I want my voice to sound good, it's obvious to think about the microphone. It's less obvious to think about the headphones. Like, how does that impact the quality of my sound? And it's not so much that headphones are special or that they are some sort of microphone. It's that they are better for audio quality recording than the equivalent of speakers. Speakers can project sound that gets picked up by your microphone, and that can create this feedback loop, this echo. Headphones are a very simple way to prevent that. So headphones are very important for everybody in the conversation. Matthew Passy, our friend, the podcast consultant, if you're watching, had a tweet on this last week, and I think it is very important that everybody in the conversation wear headphones. And of course, speakers are okay. We have a setting for that on Squadcast. It's all good, but we always recommend to get the highest quality speakers.
I just want to add one thing here. As the community manager, my specialty is not tech, so I'm going to leave it to Zach and Rock. However, I do want to shout out Podcast Movement for sending me this microphone because I shared Pod Move daily with the most people. So I want a mic. Thank you.
Nice.
And it's an NT USB Rode mic. Shout out.
Sounds good.
I like it a lot.
It does sound good. I'll take on the next one. So this might seem obvious to folks, but because we are connecting online, the network connection is very important. One thing about Squadcast that we'll probably dive into a little bit later in the presentation is that the network connection is not the quality of your conversation, or the quality of your recordings rather, is not dependent on the internet connection with Squadcast. However, when having the conversation, that connection in real time, your connection is absolutely something that's important. So we've seen a couple of best practices that folks can do, such as resetting your router. Not exactly intuitive, but resetting that every once in a while. It's kind of like restarting your computer. It just starts off on a fresh sheet of music, if you will. And it's a good way to just like troubleshoot if you are having connection issues. Also, as much as I love living in a wireless world and and like using stuff like Wi-Fi, having a hardwired connection is absolutely going to improve the connection. And then also just one of the things that we've recently found is like when you're using your browser, such as Chrome or Firefox or Edge to access Squadcast, having Squadcast as the focus tab, or even here like StreamYard, having that as the focus tab is definitely a way to ensure that for the smoothest and most stable connection, just because what we found is that the browsers are like throttling down tabs that are unfocused, which is kind of strange, but just something that we've learned to work with and encourage folks to do. So yeah, having a great connection you don't need like the best fiber optic connection in the world to use Squadcast or to have any good type of remote conversation, but you do need something adequate. If you do have bandwidth concerns, there's a few other options you can do, such as like turning off your video. With Squadcast, there's always a video component, even if you're not recording the video. And we'll actually touch on that on the next slide. But yeah, just something to keep in mind because, and the final thing is like having other unnecessary apps running in the background. So if you have friends or family that are streaming Netflix or YouTube, that could also compete with your network connection. So we definitely try to encourage folks to minimize everything that's not necessary to ensure that when you are recording on Squadcast, it is a undisrupted and smooth process.
And I can touch on sending guest prep materials and homework, especially because we're here at Podcast Movement University. We do have to send you home with some homework. Just want to say, we at Squadcast are here to empower the content creators so that you as content creators can empower your guests. And in order to do that, in order to have the best possible interview with your guests, you want to send them materials in advance so that they know how to work the software, so that they feel at their best, they can give you the best interview possible. So we have a few examples on our social media of Squadcasters who have sent us emails that they use to send out. And we shout out to one of our users, G. He's really great. And he sent us some material. He sends a very concise email that essentially says, here's how you plug in, here's when you plug in, here's what you need to check for, and that's going to ensure the best possible interview for us. And I think the point to take home here is to not be afraid of over communicating and letting folks know in advance that here's how it's going to go down. Yes, it's different from Zoom, but ultimately it's going to produce a better outcome for both of our voices. We're going to sound better, and we are going to gain confidence in our listeners, and they're going to trust us in return. And doing your homework, essentially same thing. Where is your guest located? What kind of mic do they have? What kind of headphones do they have? Do they need to be told in advance to have wired headphones? Do they need to be told in advance not to use a Safari browser? And we'll get into that shortly. But there are certain things that will ensure a better experience for both you and your guest. And that's the kind of thing that you just might want to send a few emails in advance, and don't be afraid to over communicate. Anything to add, professors?
One thing I've learned is that guests aren't professional podcasters. This can be kind of new to them, and potentially, a new thing can be sometimes overwhelming for people. So to your point, Arielle, just communicating that up front is very empowering. And really, it's not always obvious. Like, why are we using Squadcast instead of this or a phone call or whatever? And it's like quality. Quality matters to our audience, and that preserves your credibility, which makes sure your message is going to land, and that's going to gain the trust of the audience. So these are all things that, of course, like check out our website, look around. There's some really great examples, like you said, emails, checklists, like different things that you can send your guests. We have some videos. There's a bunch of stuff that can be helpful in that department.
Yeah. And before we go to the next slide, just wanted to say hello to everybody who's watching live. And if you're watching a replay, hello also. But to the folks who are watching us live, please feel free to type questions into the chat, and we will either work them into our lesson for today or we'll get to them at the end. Thank you. Next slide. Interview techniques. So Zach and Rock, you two host a podcast together, and that podcast is called Between Two Mics, the Remote Recording Podcast. You've been running it for about 2 years. Over the years, you've learned each other's kind of interview quirks, the questions that you are kind of used to asking. You kind of learn each other's style. So let's talk a little bit about how you use Squadcast to record Between Two Mics and what you've learned over the years about interviewing.
Yeah, well, I can kick it off. So there's no denying that there's certain advantages to being in the same room. However, our hypothesis is that not everybody's going to have the ability to meet in the same room to have a conversation, but they're still going to want to have those conversations. So Squadcast is a way for them to connect in a virtual studio and have conversations with anyone in the world and not have to really worry or feel like they're sacrificing quality. However, like one of the things that we felt was really important to the experience was being able to see each other. That a lot of us know that nonverbal communication is a huge part of communication. So being able to see your guest and build chemistry, build rapport was something that we felt was very important to the experience in real time, but that also would be hopefully carried over to the listeners when they're listening to your content. As far as it goes for our show, I personally like having a co-host because it allows me to kind of listen a little bit better, a little bit more attentively, and not have to like worry about like asking the next question or keeping the conversation flowing. Cause Zach will be doing that. And then I can kind of listen and be like, okay, what's the next thing to talk about here that's really going to take this conversation in a great direction? Cause we always do try to plan and do our research and stuff. We really want to make our guests feel like we're excited to have them on and make them feel special by putting in the time to, really get to know them or see what makes them special and really highlight that on the podcast. But the best times almost always come from stuff that you didn't expect to happen during the podcast. And so I think like having a co-host is helpful in that sense, but I definitely get why just wanting to do it solo would be beneficial too. So some things that have worked for Zach and I is just like when one of us wants to ask a question, we'll get closer to the mic to kind of visually show each other, or like,
that's really good. That's a really good tip.
We just kind of did it. Yeah. So there's a few things like that, or like I'll back up when it's like, all right, it's your turn to go,
That helps avoid collisions. Like we've all been probably on conference calls where there's like a silence for like 2 seconds and then everybody immediately starts speaking. And that's because we don't have the visual cues of the body language of who's kind of leaning in to speak next. That's where the video element of the conversation on Squadcast is really powerful. We've had customers tell us like, I was very hesitant to use the video. I want to focus on the audio. I get distracted and stuff like that. And a lot of those people end up coming around to being like, no, I didn't quite like fully expect how impactful it could be to improving the communication. Like if it's one-on-one conversation, then it's a little bit easier to manage those collisions. But once you add like a third or a fourth person, those visual cues go a really long way.
Yeah. And I love that tangible takeaway that you just shared, that if you have a co-host, and I'm going to use that with my co-host, we often speak over each other and it can be kind of embarrassing that we're like, okay, now you, and then there's another person there that's listening to all of this happen. You're like, we promise we don't do this all the time. So it's much better if like I start going like that and you see my face getting bigger, I'm going to talk.
Well, what techniques have you and your co-host learned with your show, Arielle?
Well, we
Counter programming.
Counter programming. Yeah. We don't interview a third person most of the time. So when we do, we're kind of always thrown off. But for the most part, we're just very big into the power of planning. We like to script out our show to a certain extent, and it's an innovative process. At first, we were scripting it out almost completely, which meant we were relying too much on the script. Now we're kind of scaling it back to bullet points, and that seems to be a nice happy medium. We did try one episode completely off script, and it ended up being a lot of silences where we were thinking of what to say. So I don't recommend that. I think the nice happy medium for us is in bullet points, and we see that that's come to be the case with a lot of the folks that we are friendly with in the podcast space as well. We recently did a crossover episode. So me and my co-host, and then another podcast. So 2 people, and 4 people talking at one time is a lot. It can be a lot. So we planned it out. We had a script. We knew who was going to speak when, and it ended up going really well. So the power of planning.
Nice.
That's consistent with our experience too. We had, when we first started Between Two Mics, I would formulate like 10 or 8 questions or whatever that we would go through in order. So that was great for the flow of conversation. But what we found, what worked best for us was having a general outline so that Zach and I could be on the same page about knowing where we wanted, or at least having some sort of idea of where we wanted to take the conversation, but really leaving us that opportunity and room to be flexible and improv as needed and really take the conversation wherever it went. Because a lot of folks that, you want on your podcast, and maybe because they're interesting for one specific reason, but often what we found is there's a totally different story that maybe we didn't know was going to happen that comes from it. And that's really where the magic happens, but it's hard to plan for that.
Yeah, I think when it goes to doing your homework, what we mean in this scenario is knowing who your interviewee is, at least to a certain extent. Some folks will go as far as to do an entire pre-interview process, half hour, potentially an hour on the phone to figure out what can be asked, what should be avoided, where the good stories flow, and what makes somebody clam up. That is a tactic. It also means that you're going to have a lot of time, or have somebody who can do that pre-interview for you, and then trust that person enough to give you notes that you will then take with you to the actual interview. I like to go somewhere in the middle. I like to do a whole bunch of research, have that person send me a bio in their own words, not something that's copied and pasted, but hey, who are you? Write that out. Let me know who you are. I then do my own research. I think a really big piece of advice that I got from somebody, possibly Harry Duran, is to listen to that person on other podcasts to see what questions they get a lot, and avoid asking those questions, because why else would they come on your show to be asked the same thing over and over again? Really hit them with some questions that are kind of out of left field. And then to wrap it up for the interview techniques, like we said before, send your guest prep material. We find it to be really important, not only to send them how to get onto Squadcast, the instructions for how to get onto Squadcast, but also prep materials in terms of what kinds of questions are you going to be asking them. That doesn't mean you have to write out your entire script to them. But for example, I have a podcast where I interview podcast related people about what they do in the podcast space. It's a quick 10-minute interview, and I send them in advance, hey, I'm going to ask you about what got you into the space. I'm definitely going to ask you what you're listening to right now. And I'm definitely going to ask you, what was the first podcast that you ever listened to? Those are the 3 definites. Other than that, it's kind of up in the air. I was about to say a shit show. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to curse, and then I did it anyway. Here we are. Here we are. So that's what I do. What do you guys do to prepare your guests?
I think that's a really good move that you do, and it's also transparent. It shows your guests. It communicates to them your level of preparation, which is something I always, as somebody who is a guest on other people's show, pretty regularly, I like to pay attention to those things and learn from the preparations that the practices that different hosts have. And if something stands out to me, I'll let them know and thank them for the level of preparation that they did. It makes me feel good and like a valued guest, a valued member, contributor of the show. And it also gives me confidence that, this shared time investment of recording this conversation is going to add a lot of value for the listeners, for the audience. And And some shows, like winging it, is cool too. You know, I think we just had a webinar with Amy Jordan about improv, and there's a whole kind of approach to podcasting that could fit in that category. We like to kind of stay somewhere in the middle where we improv some questions as follow-ups. Sometimes people interview us or we listen to other people's podcasts where you can kind of tell the person is just asking the next question. They're not necessarily considering and asking a follow-up question based on something that the guest just said. And it's like, well, we may as well be having kind of a passive interview here. If I just sent you a list of questions, maybe you send me back your list of answers. That's cool too. I guess there's some people who do that. But we think that the real power here, right? Our mission is to amplify collaboration. So we want to empower you to collaborate. And that comes with the dialogue, not just this back and forth ping pong kind of approach.
Next slide.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Next slide. What's in the box?
Well, like we've talked a lot about audio and quality and recording on Squadcast or just recording remotely in general. I think a lot of these techniques are applicable across platform. So whatever you're cool with there. And on Squadcast, our customers were asking us, can I record the video? Because like Rock said, we have always had video since we launched in beta, I believe in 2016. We've had video because of the body language, because of the eye contact, the nonverbal elements of communication that really add to the experience. And I think that led our customers to ask, podcasters to ask, like, can I record that video too? And, that's a really good question. And we paid attention to that. And for a lot of reasons that are documented on our blog and our podcast and all over the place, we thought that was a good idea. So on Squadcast, in addition to the audio, you can also not just repurpose that audio into some form of video, like is common. You can also have the straight up source video recordings of everybody in the conversation, with the same emphasis on quality, reliability that we've always had for audio. Those same lessons learned have all gone into, plus a lot of love and care have gone into the video update that landed in January. So there's some more info on this slide. I'm not a big fan of reading slides, but I think the real value here is that you're investing the same time as a podcaster. You're having a half an hour-long conversation. And with video, you're walking away with much more potential content to do creative work with, to create promo materials for your social media, of your guest speaking and saying the powerful message that they have, or publishing the entire content, the entire episode on video platforms like YouTube. Meet your audience where they are. And Edison Research has talked a lot about the show with a capital S. Podcasting is part of your show. And this is mostly from the audience perspective. So quality is a big part of the audience experience. And we felt like meeting our audience where they are, if they have eyes to watch on their phone, on their lunch break, or just ears while they're commuting home or running, like all that is cool. We want to provide, the content that is high quality for your audience.
That means I'm going to speak.
Nice.
So I just want to give a quick shout out to Crystal Prophet, who is in the audience.
She's
Crystal,
the best.
Yeah, Crystal's great. And you were on her show. So it's kind of a little meta experience talking about your experience being a guest and feeling welcomed into a Squadcast booth. Do you call it a booth? A Squadcast room. A squad room.
Session.
I kind of like booth. I don't know where that's coming from. But yeah, shout out to Crystal. And that's it from me. Rock, do you want to talk a little bit about autosave?
Yeah, well, I think my favorite thing about this video recording update is that it's essentially the same thing. The recording engine's basically the same. You can still enjoy separate ISO tracks. It's just now you get video files in addition to audio files. And yeah, we're always automatically recording backups in the background just as an extra layer of security. We just really want you to focus on creating the content and not have to do all the heavy lifting and worrying about how these files are going to be saved and recorded and all that stuff. So really just helping you focus on the content. As a podcaster, you're a content creator, an artist of sorts, and that's a tough enough job. So we really want to take care of all the heavy lifting when it comes to that. And again, it's just to do more with your content. It's to have a presence on YouTube and not just be like a blank background with audio, or be able to do some fun promotion with social media. Data is showing that the second most common way that folks are finding podcasts these days is social media, and that continues to rise pretty significantly. Number one is still word of mouth, which is awesome. I mean, that's one of the things that I think is really cool about podcasting. Is it's like a real grassroots type of movement, and at Squadcast we certainly embrace it. Like, being active in community events like Podcast Movement is a huge part of our story and how we've been able to grow and nurture relationships with podcasters and folks in the podcast industry. So really grateful for that. But if you don't have a video component to your show and you feel like your hands are full with audio, like, we're not saying you absolutely need to have video recording. However, there are some advantages to having a video element to your show. Cause again, it's a lot of people are finding shows via social media, or YouTube's a great place to get found. And so being able to provide some engaging, captivating content via those channels is something we're trying to help you all out with, if that's what you're looking for in your show.
Yeah. And if you want to learn more about that, we are having a free workshop on Friday, the 23rd at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, in a partnership with Pod Sound School, where Studio Steve is going to be teaching everybody about how to take your clips from Squadcast and make them into really pretty video elements, whether that's for marketing, for uploading to YouTube completely, totally up to you how you want to use it. That's a free event. You can find out about it by going to our Twitter. That's twitter.com/SquadcastFM, and it's our pinned tweet. Again, that's twitter.com/SquadcastFM.
Yeah, super stoked. Love the work that the Pod Sound School does. Big fans and friends and all that. So this will be a good event to learn what to do with videos now that you're recording them, and how you can work that into your post-production workflow.
So let's talk about how we collaborate remotely. Let's talk about, thank you, Jared, by the way. Shout out to Jared. He just went to our pinned tweet and gave us a like. So thank you.
Thanks, Jared.
Nice.
Hope to see you at our event with Pod Sound School.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what your setup can look like. So Zach, obviously you have a very beautiful setup behind you. Rock, yours is okay. It could use a little sprucing up.
Ouch.
Yeah,
Ouchie.
that's cold.
I don't know. Zach's is just like so beautiful with the pink and everything.
Oh.
Tell us about that. Tell us about key, fill, and background light.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we touched on microphone a little bit. We touched on headphones, but with video, you have the camera as a consideration. And with camera, right, you have lighting consideration. So that's really where it's kind of like, it's as complicated as you want to make it. You don't need to make it all that complex. Thankfully, like, the sun comes out every day, and is the natural lighting is the best source of lighting.
That's California privilege.
Oh, yes. Thank you. I just take ownership of that. Here in Oakland, in California, the sun is still coming out. So thankful for that. And usually the sun is a good source, but that's really where, if it's not, and I want to have consistency for the video content that I'm creating, that's really where the key, fill, and background lights come in. I have like some LEDs behind my bookshelf here. Nothing real fancy. Those are C by GE. I think they sell them at like Target, normal kind of places. And then there's a couple above me that I can use to kind of create these 2-color lighting palettes. We do video work in this particular studio setup as well, kind of when we can get together pre-pandemic. And that's really where there's some overhead lights that is like a LED fill and like a more powerful key light. And that's really when we're doing things like into a DSLR camera. You can see up here, there's a couple cameras back here. There's a DSLR camera. That's not what I'm on now, but whatever you're coming in with as far as camera equipment, that's all good. We'll empower you to record quality content on that. It's just that you can kind of have these additional creative elements to enhance what you look like on camera, and you start to get into like color science and white balance, and that is a deep rabbit hole that you do not need to go down, but you can if you like to. Yeah.
Next lesson in 202. This is 101.
We'll be back.
And just to say, Rock, my setup's not too beautiful either.
I like the license plates.
Except for the
I got thick skin. Don't worry about me.
I think sometimes when I get nervous, I insult.
I didn't think you got nervous. Good to know.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not my best quality, but we're all owning up to things. You know, it's important to be honest. So, Rock, tell us about your setup. What's your boom arm doing right now?
It's my boom arm is holding my microphone for me, because if you're like me, I tend to be pretty animated when I'm talking. So I like to move my hands around a lot, sometimes even my head, which I'm getting better at not doing. But really the boom arm just makes it so that the mic stays at an appropriate distance. And one of my favorite things to talk about when giving folks advice on how to record remotely, especially, is like about the environment, being mindful of your environment and treating your environment to be more accommodating to recording audio or video. Because I think a lot of us podcasters, if you're like me, you weren't trained in audio. You just wanted to talk, right? You just had passion for a certain subject and wanted to get behind it and use the vehicle of podcasting to get your message heard. But again, there's a lot of like audio techniques or things, for lack of a better way of putting it, that you need to consider. And so like room treatment is a big one that's been a huge learning experience for me, but I've also seen it be a big part of podcasters learning to improve their sound quality. It's not intuitive. Like I think we get so fixated on the equipment, like the microphone, the computer, the headphones, but don't realize that like the room that we're in is actually contributing and impacting the quality the most sometimes. So what I've done is do a little bit more less sophisticated things than our friend Zach there. So he's got some like audio panels in the background. That's those black looking things. I'm using pillows to kind of muffle my sound. So that's just how I roll.
Where are
they? They're behind my computer. Unseen. Yeah. So you'll see podcasters do a bunch of may look like goofy things, like record in their closet because the clothes can absorb the sound and lead to less echo or reverb or anything like that. Or like being in a room with curtains or a rug can absorb that. Putting a towel on a hard surface like or like a table or something can also really positively impact that, in addition to using the appropriate distance between your mouth and your mic. Those are all things that we've found can consistently impact your quality in a positive or negative way. But I think the best part is that most of this stuff doesn't cost you anything. You don't necessarily have to invest in those audio panels like Zach did. That's just, it's a good move by him and it looks great and it's getting great compliments from all sorts of people. So I think it's well worth that investment, but you don't have to spend a lot of money to improve the quality from a room treatment or environment perspective.
Yeah, another thing to be mindful of is I like to just kind of close my eyes, and this can be a little bit meditative if you're into that, but just kind of close your eyes and just pay attention to the sounds around you, and then try to reduce those things. So like I have a bulldog, he makes a lot of noise while he's just he snores while he's awake, so he's not necessarily the best for audio quality. While we do love Gladstone, he's not a podcaster yet. And the other things like your dishwasher, your refrigerator, your neighbors doing their yard work, or any of
laundry.
Laundry. These things make noise, and the further you start going down this kind of particular exercise and practice, you start to notice a lot of noises around you, and noise pollution is a big thing, you know. So this can be something that we can introduce to our practice going forward. But I just try to not be like overly zealous about this, or like try to get every little sound out of the equation. Like we can like do a lot with that in post-production, but for the most part, like we encourage being proactive for your actual production rather than trying to fix it in post. Is this common like running joke amongst audio engineers? It's a lot easier to address these things up front and be proactive during your production or pre-production than it is to try to remove a bulldog snoring in post-production. Like, that's just a fact. So I like to practice that.
And that's also where Squadcast can be on your side, is during production, but not during post-production. So while you're with us, try to get the best tape possible, I think is kind of what you were referring to, Zach.
Yeah.
It's I was in an interview with somebody recently, and I heard kind of a whirring in the background of their audio, and I was like, hey, you know what? It's probably fine. It won't come out in the post. And of course it did. I should have said something at the time, but you sometimes get nervous. So that just kind of brings it back to empowering yourself and empowering your guest to over communicate.
Yeah, I have a new podcast on my personal podcast that I started, and my co-host is new to podcasting. And every episode we've gotten a little bit better with her environment, because we're kind of hearing things and then we try to reverse and figure out, like, what is that coming from? And like, oh, my laptop kicks the fan on, and that can be picked up depending on what kind of how sensitive your microphone is. And this is where you see OG veteran podcasters not necessarily recommending like the Blue Yeti as a microphone because it's incredibly sensitive. So other microphones can be a little bit more forgiving if you don't have a really dialed in soundscape kind of environment to record audio. So it's not that that's not a good microphone. It's just that, you know, you kind of want to play to your strengths. If you know you're not going to be in a sound treated environment, maybe don't get a mic that sensitive, I think is what a lot of people are trying to say about that. But I'll leave that consumer choice up to you, or you can look at the RPS report as to what other podcasters are doing.
Let's quickly touch on post-production workflow and publishing. So what is your process, Zach and Rock, for Between Two Mics? What happens after you record your podcast?
We're evolving here thanks to a lot of your contributions. We've just made a bunch of improvements to the podcast with like new artwork and 3-act structure and a lot of these different improvements that we had identified. But what we do is we record. We have all those audio and video files now. I like to do the intro for our guest not in front of them. I like to do it after we record with them, because I tend to learn things about them during the conversation that I think bringing that into the intro is nice. And so I record that intro, and then we have a ability to mix the audio recordings on Squadcast, and our production team prefers to have kind of ISO tracks to work with, but also the mix as a reference. And we mix that, and then we get the share links to all of those audio and video files, and we provide that to the production team that begins work on transcribing, on doing kind of a first pass, so-called paper edit, and just kind of removing some of the things that that aren't, you know, for the finished product. And sometimes we leave like little voice notes in there, like, hey, Arielle and Vince, like, please remove this, or let's try that again, or something like that. That's totally cool to do. We do that. And then we hand it over to the production team to work on in, I believe Adobe Audition is the kind of tool of choice within our team, but we have some Pro Tools operators. Like, there's a bunch of different ways you can Audacity, there's, you know, Alitu, there's Descript, there's a bunch of tools here that can help you with your post-production workflow. And then when it comes to publishing, one of you two want to touch on that?
Yeah, happy to. So once I do the edits, send it off to Vince. Vince finishes it. We actually do a lot when it comes to creating assets for our show. So thankfully we have a whole design team led by Alex, and he makes these really beautiful audiograms. He also makes quotes on Canva or on Figma that also correspond with the opening sentence of the show. So we really like to put our guest front and center so that their quote opens up the show, sets the mood for the show, and then that quote gets shared all over social media in preparation for the episode going live. The episode that we just had go out today was with Anna Gogo, and it's a really great interview between Zach Rock and Anna about how she got her start in the podcast space. And we started off with a really cool quote from her. And I believe it really just sets the mood on as to what the conversation is going to be about, with some music. And then that's where we go from there.
Yeah. And that promotional element is something that I think it'd be tempting to like feel done once you hit publish, but like that's kind of just the start from your audience perspective. So that's really where the audience engagement comes in, and we're so grateful to have an awesome community manager like yourself to really foster those conversations and lift the guest up.
Yeah, and then Rock, do you want to talk about how we repurpose some of our audio?
Yeah. So we, like you said, turn it into, well, you didn't say that. Excuse me. I was going to talk about the audiogram. No, but yeah. So we work with a wonderful company called Podreacher, ran by Jackie Schiff. She's very active and involved in the podcast community. So she's pretty easy to find. But if you want to get in touch with her, we'd be happy to make that introduction. But her team essentially repurposes our podcast content and makes a blog out of it. So they kind of find what are the highlights, what's the story, or what's something that we can learn and share with people, and cater to those that like learn through reading. So really, really excited about that, because you again kind of get to maximize the same piece of content and reach more people. Some of us learn by listening. That's like you, Arielle, and then some of us learn by reading.
I haven't read a book in more than a year. Don't tell anyone.
I won't.
Secret safe.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I feel incredibly grateful for, that I know is not the case for all podcasters, especially when you're first starting off, is having a team. We definitely understand that there's multiple hats to wear, multiple jobs to be done, and that can be all pretty time consuming. And we do encourage to have some type of editing, post-production workflow, because that is some of the benefits of recording something and not going live, is you can kind of slice and dice and change and really make you and your guests really sound and look great. However, that can be time consuming. So if you love editing, God bless you. And I that's great. But if you don't, I totally sympathize with you. But it is probably we highly encourage having some type of editing, because it will add that polish and premium quality to your show.
Yeah. And ultimately, we want to empower you to create great content so that your audience trusts you, so that you fill your ultimate goal of having your podcast, whether that's to build awareness around your brand, to build up your own identity as an expert in your field, to funnel people to your website, whatever the case may be. We want to be there for you to create, to be the vehicle to create the awesome things that you're creating.
There's some very talented editors in this very group. So like Brittany Felix or Motion Agency, or I believe, Pod Sound School will help you learn how to do this yourself, if that's more your thing. There's like, Bradley Denham. There's a bunch of Daryl Darnell, a lot of friends in this group that I believe can help you with that if you're a podcaster looking for those resources.
Oh, out of 50,000 people in this group, I bet, I don't even know, so many talented podcast producers, engineers, editors, all over the place. You run a small city, Jared and Dan, mid-sized city. All right. Yeah. Anything to add before I give us our recap?
I think this has been fantastic, and looking forward to the questions. But yeah, let's put a bow on it.
Yeah, here we go. To recap and to give full transparency as to why we're giving a recap. I am a big advocate for, at the beginning of a lesson, because we're at university right now, at the beginning of a podcast episode, telling people what's going to happen in that podcast episode, then doing that, having that happen, and then recapping what just happened. It's just a learning tactic that I personally benefit from, and I imagine some others do as well. So to recap, we had a discussion about equipment. We talked about mic placement. We talked about mic technique. We talked about wearing headphones always. We talked about creating remarkable content. So how do you do that? How do you show your co-host that you are the one asking a question? Things like that. We talked about video recording and how it can definitely help in some marketing elements, but you don't necessarily need it, and how we are having workshop on the 23rd with Pod Sound School. And if you want to find more about that, you can go to twitter.com/squadcastfm and attend that free event. It is pinned to our Twitter. We talked about collaborating remotely. We talked about doing your homework, making sure you know who your guest is, making sure that they know how to connect, making sure that you are ready to go with your questions and that you're going to make them feel special so that you can create beautiful content together. Anything to add to our recap, professors?
No.
Well done.
We covered
A+.
Yeah.
I'm the TA.
Some homework in there too, I guess.
Yeah. All right. And with that, we are going to open the floor to questions and see if there are any for us. I'm watching over here. And if there are no questions, then I can just plug things. I've got a few things to talk about before. Oh, we do have a question. Yes. Okay, here's the question from the Mediocre Mom Show. Shout out. Does Squadcast have the ability to add captions?
So we have some elements. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by captions, but we do have chat, which is something we've seen people use as kind of a way to keep notes with like timestamps. There's some different ways to utilize that. And we have some really far out ideas for using the broader definition of the term caption. So look forward to that work coming soon.
We've got another question from Elizabeth N. What techniques, social or technical, have you discovered to improve group recording that can help compensate for poor internet connection you can't fix? That's a really great question.
Yeah, I'm happy to touch on this. On our platform, the quality of the internet connection, the connectivity does not degrade the quality of your recordings. So that's a key distinction, right? Like that there's a conversation happening, that quality will kind of ebb and flow, but the recording is completely separate of that and is a constant quality. And that's really how you can capture everybody and make sure that they sound like they're in the same room. What we hear I've heard it a few times on this conversation, what we hear on Zoom conversations and Skype and things like that, is you hear kind of this digital sound, this robot sound, this latency, all of these different things. Like this is taxing for our ears to kind of process, especially for long form content. So I think your heart's in the right place. That's one way that you can improve the quality of the content. That's the Squadcast answer. But outside of Squadcast, you can record what is called a double ender. You can ask everybody to record themselves and send you that audio after the fact. You'll have to align that audio. You'll have to get them to move around and send you those files. And you'll have to ask your guest to jump through some technical hoops to record themselves. And that's where we have basically automate that same thing. We do a double ender for you and make sure that all that heavy lifting. So those are both two options that you can consider. Depends on where your guests are at on that.
Let me just quickly jump in to say that we would love to offer a code to Podcast Movement community members. So to get $40 off of Squadcast, just use code PODMOV, PODMOVE21 at checkout at squadcast.fm. We are always grateful to our friends at Podcast Movement. I think both Zach, Rock, and I separately all had our first big podcast experiences at Podcast Movement. So always have a very special place in my heart. And also I've won two microphones from Podcast Movement. So really, really special to me. So definitely use this code, screenshot this, and we will be very happy to see you on Squadcast. We have a few more questions and a few more minutes. Here is from Sylvia Sir. I was just looking to buy some good headphones. Are there any you recommend or any tips I should know? Thanks.
Yeah, well, definitely wearing some. Which ones do you two like? You have Audio Technica ones, I believe.
I have Audio Technica.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the pricing. Are those reasonably
priced?
These
were $50.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, not too bad.
Less than $100. I think you can get some really good studio quality headphones in that price range. But any headphones are better than speakers. So
even the Apple ones.
Yeah, even if they're just little earpods. Earbuds, I should say. Even if they're just earbuds, that's cool too. Just not speakers, I think, is the takeaway. And everything else is just a bonus for your ears, which are important.
Another question from our friend Crystal. Do you have a specific resource an upcoming guest could watch, read, etc. to prep for a Squadcast interview?
Yeah, so we absolutely do. We definitely want to communicate expectations and let folks know what they can expect, I guess, from a recording session on Squadcast. So we have a few ways of reaching folks. We have like a connect and record checklist that we share with our customers to encourage them to share with their guests. But also there's a demo video you can watch. There's if you
From
schedule
a guest perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you schedule a session on Squadcast, automatic emails are sent where it communicates expectations and best practices on how to have a good session on Squadcast, but also just some general general tips on recording remotely in general as well. And I believe you actually put out a pretty cool video recently on Instagram, Crystal. So shout out to you for doing that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. We also have, I believe, a webinar, Get 'em to the Squad, which is all on this topic, and a bunch of really great community resources for members of our Facebook groups, the This Remote Life and Squadcaster Podcasters. So podcasters helping each other there.
Yeah, and let's jump in. I think we're going to take one last question. And then if you have any more, folks, please feel free to send them to us. Our emails are right there on the screen. Zach at squadcast.fm, Arielle at squadcast.fm, and Rock at squadcast.fm. The question went away, but I'm happy to answer it.
I remember it, yeah.
We love a tough question, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you're asking us about the difference between Zencaster and Squadcast. We're happy to answer that. Yeah, we let me just start out by saying we're friendly with everybody who is in this business, and everybody's working really hard to make sure that that podcasters have software that makes it easy for them to podcast. And with that, go ahead, professors.
Yeah, I'll go.
Yeah,
you're going to go, Zach? All right. Well, again, like Arielle said, that I think, at the essence, we're both trying to accomplish similar goals. We're really trying to empower podcast creators to connect remotely and look and sound amazing. However, I think the execution and the processes that we go about it are a little different. We definitely encourage you to try out all the options available. And that's just really because we feel very confident that after you hang out with us for a little bit, you'll see what the difference is. It's you got a full team of podcast fanatics behind it who just want you to have a great experience, and we're always looking to improve the platform. And we love solving hard problems, and so innovation is a key competency at our team. And so you can rest assured that it's always going to continue to get bigger and better, and that's what we look forward to providing every day.
Well said. I want to pop back in and just say thank you. We have a lot of people saying thank you in the chat, and well done.
Cool. Thank you.
And Arielle, if you can just give people where's that link where they can use that promo code?
Yeah, let me share my screen again. Or you can
just say it.
Oh, if I remember it. Yeah, so if you go to squadcast.fm and you go to get yourself a plan, and then use code PODMOVE21 at checkout. PODMOV. Yeah.
Wonderful. This was wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today, and hopefully we'll get to see each of you in Nashville this August.
Oh, we really hope so. We talk about it every day. We really hope so.
She's not lying.
Stay safe, and thank you again.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Jared.
Thank you, Jared. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Bye.